Capoeira is actually the most popular martial art in the world by sheer numbers.
Um, Let me see. That was a while ago, so I have to remember the stats. But it's based upon the actual number of people
Mm-hmm.
that practice it.
Mm-hmm.
So in Brazil, because of their population, because it's such a national sport, and in some other countries as well, based upon the sheer number of people that actually do it, it's more than some karates and some taekwondos that are worldwide. Because capoeira is worldwide too, but it's just based on the number. So like the USA, you're like, yeah, I know what karate is, I know what judo is, but the actual number of people, even jiu-jitsu, where people think, they need an Olympic sport and they need to be paid more, the number of people that know what it is really are not, it's not that high. Or the number of people that actually practice it is not that high. Everybody in martial artists, we have a lot of hubris in that sense that we think what we're doing is awesome and everybody wants to do it. And there are a lot of people doing it when in fact, there's not that many for it. So yeah, capoeira is actually one of the most popular based upon the number, not popular in every country, but because the amount of people that do it in Brazil and a couple other places, it's very high.
Capoeira was fascinating. The first introduction to it, and if you've heard this before, either if you're listening or even yourself, bear with me here. But I was introduced to it in Nashville. There's quite a popular scene there, actually, with a couple of different people and practitioners that just love it. And I got to learn a little bit of the history of a lot of the slaves, but basically hiding their fighting capabilities and whatnot. You want to briefly go through that real quick?
Well, so I like to tell people, this is a little, maybe not what people are used to hearing, but I like to say that the first generation of Africans that came to the Americas, I like to call them prisoners of war. So most of them were warriors that were captured in battle. There were doctors, there were musicians, there were all that stuff that got taken on the boats to the Americas. And if most people don't know, for capoeira wise, in Brazil, about 80% of the Africans went to Brazil. Only about 20% went to the North America.
I did not know that.
So you got what, 200,000, 300,000 in North America. Brazil had like 4 million slaves, like through the Caribbean, then channeled to North America, but then Brazil, 80%. So way further, or way more population of Africans there. Also, slavery ended a lot later in Brazil. And if you go to Brazil and you go to a couple counties over from the big city, you'll see that it's really like 1950s America.
Wow.
In some of those places. Like it's very scary, racial wise. But the capoeiristas, that first generation of warriors, they combined some of their styles of fighting and they kind of made it look like a ritual. So they didn't know they were practicing. But eventually, of course, everybody kind of, after you get kicked in the head, you're like, oh yeah, they're dance fighting, right? Yeah. So after that, they outlawed not just capoeira, but they outlawed the public assembly of blacks in Brazil until like the 1930s.
Wow. Okay.
1930s. You couldn't have a samba party. You couldn't have a salsa party. You couldn't have a birthday party. You couldn't get together to train martial arts. You couldn't do anything. And this was after slavery was done.
Yeah.
They still had the law.
Wow.
And so,
is this specifically because they were training and it was like, there might be an uprising?
Yes, there was. There was lots of uprisings and a lot of escaped slave communities. They were called quilombos. They were basically like African kingdoms in the middle of the Brazilian jungle. The largest one was called, you can still visit it today, was called Quilombo dos Palmares. It was headed by a guy that would be called King Zumbi, Ganga Zumbi, his son. But they had 80,000 people in one village out in the jungle. You couldn't get to it. They fought the Portuguese army in Brazil numerous times and won. And the only reason that the Portuguese actually won was because, or actually defeated them, was because they got the number 2 guy and they captured him and they tortured him and made them show them how to sneak up on the camp. And then they attacked them when they weren't ready, basically, and killed everybody. They quartered King Zumbi, split him up and sent his body parts everywhere. And that's how they got rid of him. But you can still visit it today. It was like a legit West African style kingdom in the middle of the jungle. But there was a lot of them like that. They escaped, and capoeira became some part of the culture for a long time, even though people couldn't practice it officially. There was lots of, and actually the word, I think, capoeira, nobody really knows where the word comes from, but some people think it means chicken fighting, or it means a clearing in the woods where you practice in secret.
Oh,
So nobody really quite knows.
I didn't know that either.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Dude, is there a translation now that they
No,
know? Okay.
it's a very like archaic, but I think it's a mix between um, where people combine languages.
Okay.
So
Okay.
it kind of sounds like this, which means this, and it kind of sounds like this from this language, which means this.
Yeah,
But you got to realize that of course, one of the things that the slave masters know, North America or South America, is that you split families and you split tribes.
Languages,
Right,
outlaw
like the
languages.
Tower of Babel. You make everybody confused. Nobody can do an uprising because we can't really communicate.
Yeah.
So they split families. So a lot of the martial arts in capoeira and the rituals are bits and pieces of different tribes, right? So that's kind of how it came about. And yeah, like I said it wasn't even legal to do capoeira training until the 1930s.
That's
In
wild.
Brazil, 1930s.
Yeah, that's
we already had one world war.
I know, right?
And they fought in the war.
Yeah.
And actually, the one of the movies and the songs that everybody knows from capoeira is Paranauê, 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 and that comes from the war that Brazil had with Paraguay, and all the heroes of the war were all the guys that practiced capoeira in secret, but they were the best warriors because they fought all day.
That's cool. I didn't know that.
And so they came back from the war as war heroes because they actually knew how to fight.
That's
it was still illegal,
right? that's wild. And what? So one thing, we are in your dojo. Do you call it a dojo?
Dojo, academy.
Okay.
It's called academy.
Academy.
For us, but
so
yeah,
if
whichever one.
I was gonna say, like if I don't know how much the cameras can see, but Monair, I learned that the first time I met you. You were like, it's actually pronounced this way. I remember butchering it all those years ago. But you do MMA. So one thing I wanted to ask, right, as a martial arts academy, is what was your transition into jiu-jitsu, kind of the MMA scene? Like, what made you? So, okay, I'm going to do a two-parter here. First, why capoeira for you? Like, what made you go, that's the one I want to dive into, right? Because outside of MMA, I would say the biggest, which is only fairly recent in the last few decades, one of the biggest, I would say, Achilles heels of the martial arts community was pigeonholing. Because there's a lot of egos and there's a lot of dick measuring contests, right? So even with Helio, right, for him, when he was doing jiu-jitsu in Okinawa and in Japan growing up, like, a quote that I put on one of the graphics was like, they came to challenge me, they didn't come to train. And that was purely because like he literally just wanted to share. And then karate's from Japan, Okinawa, took it to the mainland, whatever. They're like, want to chat like an Ip Man type story. So pigeonholing as a problem for you. First things first is, how did you get into capoeira? Why? And then second, how did you transition into?
Well, capoeira one's really easy. It's that was because I watched the movie Only the Strong, where that song comes from. We were all, the song, that movie came out in like, 93, 97, something like 93, I believe. I started practicing capoeira like 97, 98 or so. And, by that time, it was just a matter of finding somebody that knew capoeira. And so when I started capoeira, the guys I started with, nobody was above what you would call a white belt level.
Okay.
But they knew stuff that I wanted to know. So I learned as much as I could from whoever I met. And then when I was able to get to a proper academy with a proper teacher, then of course I could excel. And then for the MMA and the other things, I've done martial arts my whole life.
Okay.
Whenever I could. Before my mom got remarried, there wasn't always enough time or enough extra money to go and do those things. So I did it when I could, and then if she switched jobs, I mean, she was retired military and a insurance like vice president, but it takes a lot of time, right? So, and my brother and sister are way older than me, so when I had that time to do it, I did, and then I was also like the star of my football and track team since middle school to high school. So that took most of my time. So once I got once I started winding down from those, then I really started picking up martial arts more, especially when I got my own jobs and I was able to drive myself to things, you know. So that's how I started doing that, and I've just been doing it ever since. When I joined the military, um, I opened my gym a year before I got out, and I was like, well, this is what I want to do. I don't want to wait until I'm 45, 46, retired colonel. Hey guys, come to my gym. You know, I'm barely moving. So I was like, I want to open it now. And that was many, many, many moons ago. So it's been going well.
Right. And there's a lot of ups and downs, obviously.
Oh, yeah.
For worldwide, you know, the last couple of years threw a monkey wrench in there, right? With what I will call the cerveza sickness, right? Has really thrown some monkey wrenches. You can't see it. We were trying to set up maybe the cameras on one of the other walls over there, but I mean, there are some world champs, you know, that are either fairly recent or as well in the past here. So, no small manner, right? And you can even see kickboxing here, and there's capoeira, and there's just all different labels all over them, right? So very well rounded, right? When you started driving, right? You said you had done multiple, right? That was the bridge you had said. You said there was you had the kind of the mobility
my own
freedom,
money
yeah,
and my own mobility.
Okay.
And then even though my mom did get remarried to a retired first sergeant, but they both also did a lot of work. You know, they never really just sat around the house or anything. They were always like out doing their job. So, but once I had an opportunity um, to you know, my own money, because I worked at I used to tell people I had two jobs most of the time when I was a kid, whether it was like Saturday, Sunday, or you know, a couple of hours at night, you know, McDonald's or the local buffet store. But I basically had one job to like fix up my car with cool parts, and then I had another job to take care of life. And part of that life was, you know, martial arts and stuff. But yeah, like I love it to death. Like I tell people, even all these years later, um, I'm still as excited about teaching and excited about doing it. I just did something this morning on the beach for the holiday with everybody. I'm still excited about it. Like it's my passion, and I also realize that it's my way to give back to the world and to help people mature, help people grow in leadership, help people deal with life's problems and stress through martial arts. You know, martial arts is like 10% of it. The rest of it is me trying to be a good example and be a good mentor to people. You know.
Capoeira. So there's an element in martial arts, right, of culture.
Yes.
When you see karate kai learning, even in the States, unless you're at a McDojo, you know, which are around, right?
Yeah.
But there's an element of adopting culture, right, from where that martial art came from. So like you saw this, I just talked to somebody actually when I was stateside about Bruce Lee's impact on how but not just, you know, what is it, Wing Chun, you know, and later in the other different facets of what he did, but actually bringing the culture into it, because that was one of the big things that he had done that was so looked down upon, was teaching non-Chinese people Kung Fu secrets, right? And he felt that it was needed to happen. We were at a place, societal, where we just had to do this and we had to expand. Capoeira, I would say, I could be super wrong, not a practitioner. I feel like it brings more of the culture into the martial arts than any other that I've seen. There's drums, there's dancing. So you're literally learning songs along with the martial arts. Am I off when I say that?
No, I would say you're correct.
Okay.
But it's understanding that just the way that people are built in West Africa. So I was just telling somebody the other night, almost 80, 90% of the music in the world is West African. K-pop, hip hop, jazz, country music, rhythm and blues. Almost so many styles around the world that people find amazing. But my daughter dances and she does the K-pop, and she's listening to songs by some group, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's the capoeira rhythm, and she's like, whatever, Dad, and I'm like, no, that's Isha Shah. That's Isha Shah with the double slap, and I do it. And I'm like, it's also reggaeton. It's also, but that's West African. Super reggaeton, it's right? Like simple West African rhythms, and she's like, okay, you know, I'm like, it's all over the world. So the culture from West Africa because it's such a vibrant and very oral tradition and very lively tradition that just like gets into you and just makes you want to move and makes you want to have good conversations and food. It's everywhere. It's even in like American cuisine. It's in American theater. You know, all that. So the capoeira is probably one of the biggest, I would say, just melting pots of what that is. Like all that culture from there, all the good parts and some of the bad parts, right? The bad parts came from slavery, like the trauma of slavery and the trauma of going through that for generations. And so you get a lot of the emotion that comes out in the songs, like any good song, right? But people are learning it. They're learning it in Portuguese. They're learning it and understanding what it means in English. They're understanding the game of life within that circle and that context and learning about life. So most of the capoeira masters are very, very streetwise and very in tune to helping people become, just like any martial arts, very in tune to um, helping people mature and grow. But I think the difference in capoeira is that so many of them are very streetwise. You know what I'm saying? They have what we call a militia.
Okay.
So like some people think it means a bad word, like malice, but for the Portuguese or Brazilians, militia is more like you're cunning and streetwise. They don't care how strong you are in capoeira. You get the strongest, you're the fastest. The person that has the most cunning is gonna win the game. Right? It's just like watching what was that? The movie Troy.
Yeah,
And boy, Aguirre, here's our champion. And he comes out and he's like 7 feet tall, all muscle. And then little Achilles comes out and they're like, ha, 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 ha.
Yeah.
And then the guy that's the most cunning is the one that won the battle in 1 second. Jumps, stabs him. Is there anyone else? You know?
You've heard that in Japanese culture too, right?
Yes,
yes. What is that saying? You probably know the Japanese like language better than myself, but he who gets angry first loses. Something like that, which is kind of why like
Musashi.
Yeah, exactly. Right. The quintessential anime is like the guy is super calm with the sword, and I have a joke that.
Well, I mean, Miyamoto Musashi is probably the best example of not character wise, but the best example of strategy in war. I mean, that's why everybody studies him and why businesses study his tactics.
The five
rings.
Yeah.
I mean, he literally survived almost 40 duels to the death, starting from age 13.
I think it was 54.
Yeah, and then he started teaching. Yeah. But before that, his first duel was at 13 to a seasoned samurai. Miyamoto Musashi was so good at it that after a while, he would get mad if he killed you, but he hit you on the place he wanted to hit you. He wanted to hit you right in the middle of the forehead. If he hit you on the cheek and killed you, he was mad. And then the last couple of fights, he didn't even do it with the sword. He did it with wooden sticks or a paddle.
Yeah, and still won. It's so because for him it was an art, right? And I don't think people realize like I was talking about with culture, like how it brings that into it. The quintessential idea of life and balance, or what the samurai way, like have you ever heard that expression, the way of the samurai? That was designed and created by him in the 15th century, right? Or is it 16th? I think it was 15, something like that.
It was 15 to 16.
Right, so that was like that. His philosophy on life was adopted by the entire culture of the Shimatsu, the Shimatsu Empire of Japan adopted that. That's literally like permeated through all of them. The way they started training the emperor soldiers and all of that is super crazy because when you read the Five Rings, if you're not a sword wielder, you're kind of like, he's talking about all these moves. He's like move number 6, slash to the face, and you're like, well, I'm not I don't do any of this. But there's such a reality to his philosophies being permeated in so many elements of even the food in Japanese, how the proper way to eat it. I can't remember the name, but you're supposed to eat in a triangle because all food is designed to enhance the flavor of gohan or rice, right? So you eat the meat, but then with the rice, or you eat the rice and then add the meat and you're going in a circle, and then you got to taste the meat. So
interesting.
That all came from his idea of balance. When I was learning kanji, sorry, I'm going down a rabbit hole, but
I understand. Yeah.
When I was learning kanji or the 3 alphabets, I would write them on a whiteboard, and they would always get mad at me. And I'd be like, hey, bro, I just learned 1,500 kanji in X number of months. Like, do you know how hard that? And the Japanese people don't think in that way. They're like, no, you're wrong. And I'm like, it's not wrong.
It must be this first.
And then he'll draw it on the board, and I'll draw next to it, and I'll go, they're the same thing. And he goes, no, listen, your balance is off. Okay, great. I understand what you're writing, but your balance is off, which means in Hanzi, which is Chinese characters, or kanji, which is Japanese characters, the actual angles, if you're drawing a square, changes the actual meaning of that. Now, apply that to martial arts and BJJ.
And that's why, and I'm glad you said that, because strategy-wise, this is how my team has been very successful against a lot of Japanese fighters and teams, because I understand the process of how they think. Whereas for Americans or for some foreigners, they understand that we, for the most part, a lot of them are spaghetti in their application of things, where they're very, you must do this kanji this way, this way. If you write an A, it must be this stroke, and then this stroke. If you go down to up first, it's just wrong.
Doesn't matter.
You are wrong. You fail. You know.
Yes.
So
and they can see in the stroke marks which ones you started with, and where it ended, and all. And it's like a tracker in the woods can see that they can see that in the actual strokes. Because they're trained. So in terms of martial arts, continue. Sorry.
So in terms of martial arts, you get very they can get pigeonholed in that sense, and Americans could get very just too much all over the place. So my strategy has been to, especially when dealing with Japanese fighters, going against Japanese fighters, is to adopt the spaghetti mind into a strategy that works well against a kanji mind. And that has been very successful for us in winning a lot of things in different combat styles. But what I wanted to say was when we're talking about the culture of capoeira and how much it brings to it, is to tie it in, is that most of the Japanese styles were developed and perfected by people who are either upper middle class or upper class, right? Even karate. People are like, they learned how to use the farmer's tools. Like there was no farmers that worked 16, 20-hour days and then went in the field and started. It was all aristocrats. But the thing about capoeira is that
disarmed by the Shimatsu aristocrats who didn't want to be disarmed. I'm going to leave that there for whoever wants it. Go ahead. Sorry.
The majority of the capoeira teachers, or all of them originally, were all either former warriors, right? So maybe they were aristocrats, but the next generation I call slaves, right? They couldn't get away. They couldn't escape unless they used it. They were all hard working. I'm in the field all day. And I still got to practice and sneak around and practice kind of cunning mind. So that's why I said capoeira, the culture is not just the music and the vibrant atmosphere and the song and the dance, but it's that streetwise, to be a good person, but to also have common sense and the ability to be streetwise at the same time. You know, so you can see it in any kind of leader or any kind of politician where they just have book smarts, even if they're a good or bad person, whatever. They have only book smarts and somebody that's actually streetwise. Like they'll just run through all the people that are book smart.
There's a charisma to them. There's a flow to them, right? There's an acknowledgement.
You can't trick them. You can't, double back on them with your deals. Like they're waiting for you. They're like, I already know you're going to do that. That's why I did this. It's like the best movie scripts ever. Those are the type of people that most capoeira masters are.
Would you call someone who's mastered capoeira? Don't put them in a box by my explanation, but just in general, someone who has mastered capoeira might be anti-fragile, right? So if you've ever read that book by chance, so there's
I have not.
There's soft, which is just weak, right? There's hard like a rock, but it can still be broken because you hit a rock hard enough and it breaks. And then there's anti-fragile, which moves and molds and adapts to the changes. So you'd say it's like entirely based on being anti-fragile.
Very, very much so.
What is something? Okay, that was small.
Yeah,
I don't want to cause issues. So even bringing up a different dojo is weird.
No, I don't mind.
Okay, thank you. I was going to ask because people outside of Okinawa don't understand why I just reacted the way I act. If you lived here and you've been involved in the martial arts community, they're real touchy-feely. It's very close.
Yeah.
Okay. What you're describing, when I sat down with Helio and talked about flow and this idea of flow that he has developed as a safer way to train, but also it's on the mat is it is a streetwise, it is an anti-fragile, it is an ever-changing, right? So for him, he developed this strategy because he was so tiny. If you've ever met or seen or been around him, he really is a small. He's like maybe 120 pounds, maybe soaking wet with a gi, right? So he just kind of had no choice but to flow. When you kind of made the transition into the kickboxing, the BJJ, and all these different things, did you find that streetwise, that flow, the anti-fragile of your foundation, which was capoeira, like that translated over and helped you learn faster?
The capoeira actually, I would say, is one of the most full body encompassing and full emotional, mental state, spiritual state, everything encompassing martial arts. And if you mix it with other styles, it only helps you. The same way that other styles help you with capoeira. Martial arts, like my old capoeira master used to say, martial arts really only has like a good 20 moves. Everything else is just a variation. Right? So a side kick is a side kick, whether you're jumping, spinning, doing it from the floor, back flipping into a side kick. It's all variations of the same principles of that one kick. But in the sense of capoeira, like I have a lot of my fighters actually do it too, to work on their sense of timing, their rhythm, knowing their body, being able to use everything fluidly, like somebody playing piano or drums, like use all your body parts independently to where you can do stuff and accomplish the same task. And it just makes you more efficient. It makes you more effective. There's no amount. I just did it this morning. I did I did like 4 or 5 rounds of jiu-jitsu, 5 or 6 minutes, tired, a little bit. I did 1 round of capoeira with the other guys that were on the beach. I did it for 1.5 to 2 minutes, and I felt like I did 3 or 4 rounds of jiu-jitsu. Like I had to take a break. It's your full body. Somebody's moving at you, kicking at you. So it only helps the sense of timing, but also understanding the flow. And like you're talking about with the other guy, the flow for capoeira, a lot of people, that's why some people don't see it as an effective martial art, because they watch the flow videos. You watch the demonstrations. I just posted one on Instagram of a contest from last night where a lady dodged somebody's takedown, whipped up, kicked her in the head, pow, and that was it. And I was like, oh man, she's not going to be able to taste her food for like 2 weeks, So because people only see the demo part. But that flow and understanding is part of almost all martial arts. If you let it, it can be part of jiu-jitsu. It can be part of Tai Chi flow. All those styles, and I've practiced so many styles. I teach 4 at the moment.
What are they, sir?
Right now, I teach jiu-jitsu or Brazilian jiu-jitsu, kickboxing, capoeira, and MMA, right? But I've trained in like 9 or 10 styles by this time. So all of them I'm different levels in, Western boxing, Sambo, all this kind of stuff, different levels. But I incorporate everything in there because once you start practicing, you realize that all the teachers have their principles, but most of them overlap. So there's stuff that, and I remember I used to have this in jiu-jitsu. I won some of those gold medals up there with a technique I used to call Kung Fu guard. And it was something I saw Kung Fu guys working on, and I never thought about it in my career. And I was like, well, let me try it in jiu-jitsu, and it worked. And then it kept working. And because nobody ever thought about it like that in jiu-jitsu class, it just kept working. And then it worked in tournaments. And I was like, well, look at that. And it just all overlaps. So that's why when you see people so proud of their style, and this is the best style, like for me, if I had 30 hours in a day, I would train at my gym, and then I would visit every style I could to glean a little bit more for a complete style. And it's the same thing guys did in the past. Like Miyamoto Musashi, he trained at all these different schools. He earned their diploma, and then he would go to the next school.
And
Or
then
they
he became
got
legendary, and
yeah,
they were like, "Hey, come here to
yeah,
we will pay for your food and board for
oh yeah.
weeks on it." Like really crazy.
Even the guy that created judo, Jigoro Kano, he trained at 2 jiu-jitsu schools, and then he it was Kano jiu-jitsu, and then he decided he was going to be more flowy, and then it changed from jiu-jitsu to judo, which is the way, right?
Yeah,
Not just kill you, but we're going to flow with this thing.
Yeah,
And then
yeah.
judo became the art of, or then judo went to Brazil for Brazilian jiu-jitsu,
Yeah,
and then the guy that took judo to Brazil also trained with catch wrestlers in England and combined judo Japanese techniques with the craziness that they were doing in England, which became American wrestling and American like pro wrestling
Greco, yeah.
and all that
Yeah.
stuff. And then you got jiu-jitsu. So
Yeah.
it's all there's nothing that's on its own like an island. Like if
Yeah.
you open your mind and stop being so prideful and egotistical, you're gonna learn something from everybody. I could tell you I learned more from white belts and brand new people than I ever
Is
learned
that
from
because
higher
they
belts.
have such a fresh eyes? They might not even
They're
realize.
all over the place.
So they have no rigid rules that they've set, but then
Yep.
they do something and you go, "Oh, whoa, wait
Yep.
a minute." Okay.
And it's the same thing for me when I do matches or I do tournaments
Mhm.
and I go against seasoned black belts in like jiu-jitsu. I'll do a move and all the time I get the same reaction when I do certain things
Yeah.
because they expect everybody in the world to react a certain way.
Yeah,
And I'll do
yeah.
something different and they'll kind of freeze and you'll see their face kind of do like a little like, that was interesting.
Yes.
And then I keep going.
It's a glitch.
Yeah,
It's a
they
glitch in the
glitch, like,
program. Yes.
no, when I do
yes.
this to you, you should react like this
Yes.
because I want to do this technique to
You
you.
know, it's funny. I was just talking about this so I saw Gordon Ryan win in a heel hook, and he did it in like 3 minutes or something, right? Or excuse me, like 3 seconds. It was like or 15 seconds. I don't know if you saw this. Literally,
Like this weekend?
this is no. This is the last.
Oh,
Abu Dhabi.
okay.
This is
Yeah.
this is like maybe I guess at this point a year ago, but I saw him win, and I was explaining this to Johanna because I saw this when I was wrestling as well. But you see it everywhere. They're both elite. This is the championship. They're both the best in the world, and they quite literally just proved it. The difference was when I can't remember who. I really wish I could remember who it was. When Gordon Ryan and him, the other guy, stepped up, the other gentleman was playing jiu-jitsu. And Gordon, I'm here to win, and there's only one way to win, is for me to either have more points than you or for you to tap out in pain.
Yeah.
And how I get you to the point of tapping out with pain, jiu-jitsu is just a mental structure and repetitive habit for me to easily get you there. But I don't even have to do that if I can break you're playing jiu-jitsu and I'm playing to win.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Yeah. That's the difference.
And that's because
I was trying to explain this, by the way, to my wife. And it was hard to explain because I found the same thing in wrestling for me, because when people would just, you lock up and then they'd play wrestling. They'd be doing some classical and it's like they want to lock up and they want to, and it's like, why? All I got to do is put your shoulders to that pad and the ref would call me the winner.
Yeah.
And it doesn't need to be waiting. So I would shoot. I would come out hard as possible. And I was talking about this with somebody who was going into a jiu-jitsu tournament who ended up getting second place. And I was telling them this is very key because there is a distinction here. And I'm going to tie this in, I promise. But it's not, you see this in anything with life. Mm-hmm. There are those that are here to do a podcast. There are those that are here to have a business, to have a dojo, to do what, and then there are those that take the MBA, the book, and they burn it, and they go, we're here to win, we're here to grow.
Yeah.
You're the CEO of IBM, shut down every single product we have if we can't be number one, which is 52 products. We want to be number one in this, 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 and this, and that's it. Because he's there to grow the company, not to go through the habits of having an MBA.
Yeah.
I feel like I was trying to explain this to my wife who's never done martial arts before, and I was like, you can see it in the way they approach each other, where one's there to go through the habit of playing jiu-jitsu, and the other one is like, I just need to heel hook, win, thank you, I'm the best. Right?
I just need to get the job done. By any means necessary.
Right? And sometimes I need to flow and I need to be anti-fragile. But one thing I found fascinating about this in terms of this mindset, right? Mm-hmm. I thought it was superficial at first. And this isn't a jab towards anybody at all. But I quickly, the more I've talked with people and connected all around the world, is a genuine spirituality that goes along with martial arts. So I'll give you a couple of very practical examples.
Yeah.
If the interview with Dilio Khamenei Sensei was literally like an hour and a half long, and at the very end, he literally says, "Now we can address flow," because he had to go through the entire philosophical understanding of the way he lived his life before even being able to describe it in terms for martial arts. He tried, but he really circled back later. When I sat with James Pankovics, right, who's down in Naha, he said in the first time I ever interviewed him, he literally said, "I believe karate can cause world peace." And he said, "I understand, I get it, like it's cliche." And I just kept hearing this repetitive pattern from people. And I have way more examples, but they're really close. So that's like hits home. What is the role of spirituality in, like, it's cliche to say, like, you gotta have this spiritual element and you have the monk, but what is the role?
That's a broad question.
It
Well, I would
is.
say
And
that
open-ended, I apologize.
I would say that all of us are, and my background is Christian, so I would say that all of us are we are spirit beings having a natural journey, right? So a journey of life. And in that, you have to understand that that man's, despite the bad things we do sometimes, or the bad situations we have in life, that at its purest form, the spirit inside of each person consists of light, consists of life, and it consists of love. So at the purest point of that, the martial arts always, compared to other sports, it always causes you to face yourself in the mirror. If you go to a place that actually trains, like we talked about in McDojos and stuff like that, if you go to a place that actually challenges you, it could be just forms. It doesn't mean you have to fight every day, but it challenges you to look at and really understand and stop deceiving yourself in the sense that I'm better than I am, or I'm better than other people. You can't really lie to yourself. You can tell everybody, I'm at this level, but in your heart, like, I suck. Or in your heart, like, for me, I think as a martial artist, after all these years, every day I'm like, I'm nowhere near the level I want to be. Every single day, no matter any of those goals on the wall, or any sport I've done, in track and field, in college, or basketball in college, whatever, like, all the things that I've done and accomplished, I still think there's always more to improve. But that's the spirit of a man or a woman that wants to keep growing, that understands that um, that reaching our potential or reaching a goal is an everyday thing. You know what I'm saying? So the martial arts, the spiritual side, is that it causes you to go past these hands and my thoughts and everything. It goes right to the soul, or right to the inside of the person every single day. And you have to face it. Every time a kid comes on the mat, that's part of leadership. And that's part of understanding as a martial arts instructor. That's why I said martial arts is like 10% of it. The rest of it is being a mentor and seeing where you are, or seeing where I'm at, seeing where this kid is, seeing where one of the champions is in their development with their spiritual side, and how they develop the potential inside of them without going so spiritual into it, right? It's not that kind of podcast, but
Be surprised.
right. But I mean, you got to understand that that for me, you never know your purpose unless you get it from the person who gave you the purpose in life. And you'll never want to really seek what your purpose is if you aren't faced with those challenges. And the martial arts, why it's so great, is because it makes you face those challenges every time, as opposed to like soccer, or opposed to being like an artist or something like that, whatever it is. Martial arts, because other people are literally trying to punch you and kick you and choke you, you have to get up and say, man, I got to do something about this every single day that you're out there. Somebody, a boxer, every single day. I remember when I was fighting in the ring, you know what I thought about? when time stands still, like those 3 minutes for each round seemed like 10 minutes
They
sometimes.
do. They really do.
And
Yeah.
and the thing I thought about was like, I'm sitting there punching and kicking and getting punched and kicked and choking and being choked and escaping and this and all. And I'm thinking about, I'm not even thinking about punching this guy's face. I'm like, man, I shouldn't have ate those 3 Oreo cookies 2 weeks ago. That's
uh,
probably why I feel tired. It's a
uh,
self-reflection every single
uh,
day.
wow.
Why am I this? Why am I that? Well, it makes you focus on bettering yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
really the spiritual side of martial arts, and why he probably said it can really change the world. When you really have to reflect, you stop making excuses
Mm,
for your bad behavior towards yourself, bad behavior towards other people, and you realize you need to fix you. You know what
mm,
I'm saying? You got to fix this. And the part of that, you fixing you, the spiritual side is part of me fixing me, is understanding it is my fault, but I can't fix myself. So that's why I have to look up and say, please fix me.
mm,
That's where it all connects.
mm. I know for me, when it comes to like training of any kind, when I get the itch, I'm like all in on it, right? And then life gets blah 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 blah. But I've been asked a lot, why do you even like it, or why do you enjoy it? And I've kind of had the same answer. It doesn't really surprise me that anywhere in the world where a martial art or fighting style was
Hmm.
being developed, all different cultures, races, all right, religions, it doesn't surprise me at all that there is almost always a spiritual element tied into it because it forces you to be present.
It does.
Period.
And, I would add to that because martial arts is war, right? It's
Mm.
practicing
And
for
if I'm
war.
not present and I'm thinking about the
You
business
die.
meeting, the guy's going to choke me to death.
You know,
Literally, right?
like in
So,
real life, you die
yes.
in a ring. You lose money and you get
Yes.
choked out. But the thing about it, I remember the first time I was at a professional fight, and I wasn't even fighting. I was just in the room where everybody was preparing, like all these different big names and small names and people coming up and champs and all that. And I remember the thing that really struck me was, other than warming up, the one thing that people were doing so much
Mm.
was they were praying. There was people, big old fighters, that would say a million cuss words, and
Interesting.
then they would sit down and open up a Bible and start reading and start praying. Like it was just all over the place. But it was just, that is the thing that struck me the most. It was like almost 100% of the people in the room, on both sides. I was walking around the stadium and stuff, in the back, but almost everybody was praying, or almost everybody was like quoting scriptures and throwing punches. It was because, and then if you've ever been, in situations where your life is at stake, or been in the military in some certain zones, you understand that there's really not too many atheists on the battlefield.
Uh, yeah.
Everybody's praying,
Yeah. Yeah.
even if they don't believe, they're praying,
Yeah.
because it's that heightened sense of, this could be it. And I think that a true martial arts program, even for mine, is self-defense first. I don't care what style you do, capoeira, jiu-jitsu, MMA, kickboxing, it's self-defense first. I failed you as a teacher if I teach you capoeira, the nice part, and I don't teach you how to headbutt somebody when they're stealing your wallet.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
me. Like,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
taught you the wrong way. So a lot of people say, they talk about McDojos, passing out belts, but there's so many gyms that only pass out sports.
Mm.
I want you to win this tournament. I want you to win
Yeah.
this trophy. But in real life, most of the kids, or most of those, couldn't even fight.
Mm.
There's people that go all the way through so many different styles of martial arts that have never been punched in the face square
Mm.
in their whole entire career.
That's funny. I think a study came out where men specifically overestimate their ability to fight by like
Oh,
4,000% or
oh yeah,
something,
oh
which
yeah. I
is
got that.
that number is yeah,
And even the sense, like I said, there's people that have gone through 10, 15 years in every style, never been punched square in the face, and the first time they get in an altercation, somebody hits them in the nose and they completely freeze up. It happens there. It happens in the military. There's people that, they find people all the time, like in war,
Mm.
where everybody's shooting and they die with their rifle aimed at people and never took a shot because they froze.
Mm.
They just died there with a full magazine, just looking at you freezing. You know, so it happens, and that's why we have to be conscious of that as teachers, to put you in scenarios that puts you on the edge of stress, but also covering you so you don't go off the deep end. You know what I mean? So I gotta look at each student and say, okay, that drill for that person stops right there today because they're close to their breaking point.
Mm.
And then the next time they can go a little bit further and they're a little bit stronger. The next time they're a little bit stronger. But you have some schools that they just throw you in there and kill you, and then they quit in like a week because it's
Yeah.
over the edge, you
I
know.
just talked to a lot of military guys when I was stateside, like some of which very high ranking, and I've talked to them about jiu-jitsu, and they said everybody that rolls is always so injured, and they always have neck problems and back problems. And it was like, that's not supposed to be the point. It's probably because they're going in there, and if they're new, right, they're getting thrown into the fire, right? Or if they're not new, they're just cranking on each other's neck and back all the time instead of really.
It's about flow, man. Like I've heard all the time from from doing my own stuff, not even from rolling. And so if I tell people in here, you gotta ask them, are you going or are you flowing? You want to go or you want to flow? If you want to flow, it's gonna be back and forth. I can flow with you for an hour straight and never need water, and you'll learn 10 times more than a hard competition round.
That, by the way, is real. And the most I've done is 30 minutes. And Helio every once in a while will do an hour session, and he'll start a timer like the red one over there, and he'll just bing, and he'll just leave it. And if you are too tired and you're dying, you're not flowing. You're not.
Yeah.
It's not
but
the
think
exchange
about
of
it.
information.
Mathematically, if I do a flow round and we're going back and forth and say I keep putting you in side control over and over, just flowing there, right? But if we're flowing and I'm not cranking anything, I'm not trying to win, we're just flowing. You have done 20, 30 side control escapes with slight resistance rather than a competition round where I put you in side control, I crush you, and I never let you go.
Yeah.
You have worked on nothing but your lungs trying to breathe.
Yeah. You
know?
Yeah.
So sometimes that's necessary, and sometimes to see where your cardio is or see maybe how bad you are at the moment. But even for like this morning, I'll flow with the guys and I'll put them in certain positions. But after a while, if you're not able to get out, and I see that, what's the point of me holding you there for 3 minutes and crushing you? I need to release it and let you, and then tell you, okay, this is why I kept doing that, or this is how you flow out of this. There's a time for those competition rounds to build your cardio and to build your stamina and to build your ferocity. And there's a time to flow. And you have to understand too, and I even talked about this yesterday, dealing with stress. If you are, when you're in stress, like 75% of the population around the world is feeling overstressed, overwhelmed, depressed, right? But one of the things is your body goes into that fight or flight mode. It's not made to sustain fight or flight. So I showed the picture of the famous picture of the World War II veteran, right? The one that he looks 19 and 4 years later, he looks like he's 50 years old, you know, sunken eyes, brow, you know, 1,000-mile stare, right? And it's that stress. Your body is supposed to go to a place of rest. And when you have that fight or flight in martial arts and it stays there, your learning curve is actually way down here. You're not learning much. You're just trying to survive. So if I have a person, if I go with you and you're brand new at rolling or brand new at kickboxing, whatever, if I overwhelm you and you just ball up, you're in fight or flight, you just want to run or you just want to scramble, you're not learning anything. I have to slow down and actually throw a couple punches, let you dodge. You throw a couple at me and let me dodge. And then you're actually learning something and you stay in the learning zone. So I have my guys, even the fight team, if they're going too hard, I'll go, stay in the learning zone. Or jiu-jitsu, stay in the learning zone. And they'll be like, oh, I need to calm down. Or I'm going, if I jiu-jitsu too, if I just thrash you around and smash you, all you're doing is, you know, you're not learning anything.
Yeah, you can hear it too.
Yeah.
I'm literally on the mat. When you start hearing the bangs, you go, hey, somebody over there is not flowing.
Yeah, it's not flowing.
Yeah.
You know, so, but yeah, I mean, that's what I tell people. You can have really good matches with flow. And then the thing about flow is that you can make the real way you know you're flowing is that you can make a brand new white belt look like they're a purple belt, brown belt.
I've
Because
heard this countless times.
yeah,
So I'm a white, just transparency's sake, but still I've heard this from high level people. They just say this all the time.
Yeah, and my old capoeira master used to say that too. Like if you're really good when you take somebody in to hold it for capoeira, like some little kid and their parent grandma's coming to watch you. As a master of capoeira, you should be able to make that kid almost look like an expert, and they only been doing it 2 weeks. But it's a mental thing, and it's a flow thing, and it's a less ego thing. I have to win. Everybody's watching. I have to win. So even for me in my stage, I'm very competitive, but at the same time, my health doesn't always, like whatever injury I have, doesn't allow me to be as egotistical as I would like to be sometimes. I would like to throw you around. Like I tell people, I didn't pull guard for the first 10 years of jiu-jitsu. It doesn't matter how big you were getting thrown or you were going to throw me.
Is that because you wanted, by the way, feel free to keep going, but is that because you wanted that control?
There would be no guard pull. You will throw them and dominate, But I was also young and fighting MMA and all that stuff at the time. And now as I got older, sometimes I have to do stuff that I don't want to do because my body won't let me do it. And then because of that, it caused me to see the whole other side of martial arts, which is, I think, the trend. Like even speaking of people learning from different masters, you're learning from that master at a certain point in their history as well.
Okay.
So, like for instance, I learned jiu-jitsu from Helio Gracie. I learned from the master himself. But there's a certain things that you learned if you learned from him when he was in his 30s.
Yeah.
Or when he was in his 40s, or he was his 50s, or he was old. 78 years old. You're getting a different learning experience. So yeah, you might have learned from him, but the people that learn from me or come back now, they're like, man, you're so nice now. Like, I know. But gym was a lot smaller back then, and I didn't care. You guys were basically here to help me train for my MMA fight. So if I would do 10 minutes of this and then sparring time, arm bars, fly, blah, blah, blah. People, we didn't even back in the day for our MMA team, you couldn't even wear the shirt from our team unless
you earned it.
You had to fight 5 people. Like, this would be your first day. Like, I've never trained before. You can't buy a shirt unless you fight 5 people. Fight this guy for 1 minute, fight this guy for 1 minute.
But going back to what I was saying earlier,
I'm way different now.
Yes, even bringing up my own sensei, this is exactly what I was talking about. Like, there's a lot of this mentality in a lot of dojos within karate as well, still in Okinawa, right? The mindset, even as a sensei, is I have 5 students that will be perfected perfectly. This idea of having 20 students, 30, 50 is like just not, they don't think in that regard.
No, they don't.
Right?
They don't.
Not better or worse, but that's just not their mentality, right? And it's territorial, right?
And I remember, that's like maybe 15 years ago, I was on the beach and I was just training like sidekicks or something by myself, as I generally did, like a lot of training by myself. And this old guy walks past me and he says, oh, hey, if you do your sidekicks like this, it'd be better. And I was like, oh, thank you very much. It was like, do you train? I was like, yeah, I have a gym down the street. It was like, he was proud. He fixed my kick. He was like, yeah, I have a gym down the street. He was like, okay. He was like, I have karate. I have 14 students. And he was so proud. He was like, I have 14 students. How many students do you have? And I was like, 78. And he was like, and he just walked away. And I was like, I don't know what to say. Their mentality is like it's actually like how Capoeira was before, because it was in secret. You couldn't have a class of 60 people. It was always almost like the Sith rule of 2. One master and one apprentice, and hopefully none of you died before you got passed on to the next generation. Or you had like a master that had like 5 students and they all hid in secret training. So Capoeira didn't become so big until, of course, after the law changed in the 1930s. But then when you go to America, you had a lot of people that had normal, by that time, like karate dojos, taekwondo and stuff was getting big. So it was a lot bigger academies and dojos, So, but yeah.
How did you evolve? Because you briefly touched on that a little bit, but from the beginning of starting to train, right? You had said like it was kind of based on you. I'm here to train, and then I want to teach you, but while I'm training,
Yeah.
right? To now where you, I mean, you're still competing to. I
Yeah.
think I saw you just won again another thing not too long ago.
Yeah, I try to compete like once or twice a year, but like I said, it's my health mostly of just being everything heals back very slowly.
Mm.
And most of the time it's not because of training with other people, it's because of just coughing, and my back goes out and I'm like, oh, 2 weeks, I can't do anything. And so like for me now, I do tournaments and fights and stuff like when my body allows me.
Mm-hmm.
So I usually sign up at the last minute and I have to
Uh-huh.
buy kind of higher tickets and hotel price because I'm waiting to see if my body actually holds up. Even with like stretching every day and stuff. But my transition is mostly and I think a lot of teachers from all styles and all of mankind go through the same thing when you're no longer the young bull and you have to transition and you see the other side of it, the more flowy side of it than the brute primal side. So you go from primal to flow, and then you try to teach the flow to the primals as much as you can. We call them the young Thundercats, is what one of my other coaches said.
So I was literally going to ask that as a follow up. Is talking to someone younger, would you suggest like, hey man, just skip the nonsense, and jump to this flow side. Don't get rid of the ferocity, right? And you have to push yourself.
Well, you just try to be. You learn from people. It's like the old story with like the bread, right? Why is the bread short? It was because grandma's pan was short, and that's why the edges are always cut off. It's not because it's better. It's because that's the size of her pan or whatever that she had to put it in. And so people do so many things from traditional martial arts. They don't understand the science behind it, or they just do it because they want to honor somebody, and they just do it. But you have to understand that the psychology of training people and the types of ways that we train and even just the science behind certain techniques has completely expanded in the last 20, 30, 40 years. And even now with all the stats, and now I can tell you, I can say to somebody, look, we can train all this stuff, but I'll tell you that the moves that work the most in MMA are these three. The rear naked choke, the triangle, and the kimura. Statistically, these are the ones that win the most fights. All this other stuff, 1%, 2%, 3%. You could train it, but it would behoove you to learn how to get to somebody's back. If you get on their back, you have a 90% chance of winning if you don't make any mistakes. They just have to be really good at getting out.
So this is applying deep learning data analytics into this process.
Yes. Or a knife attack. You got all these, let's do this and work on the which is cool. Like I do all that stuff. And if I go up, like I've gone to people in class, I've lined up like a whole class of jiu-jitsu people when I wanted to invite them to my new Arnis class that I'm restarting or whatever, right? And I'm like, see if you can block this. I think one person out of 30 or 40 people in the room was even able to block the first attack of my knife attack because I've been training for a long time. But at the same time, I can say, look, when we're learning knife defense in jiu-jitsu or in kickboxing class, because I teach all that in those classes too, the number one strike, 90% of attacks are number one angle. They're going to grab you and they're going to stab straight. So you should probably train this one the most. The number two attack is a one attack, one angle. Number three attack is a number two angle. So you got a 5, you got a 1 slash, you got a 2 slash. All the other stuff is from somebody that's been training. If you go on gate 2, they're going to grab you and they're going to stab straight. 90% of the time.
Gate 2.
So you got to learn how to do this to get out of it, get it this, So it takes away a lot of all the extra. And you can actually focus. And that's a lot of our secret here is I take all that data and I do a lot of research. I never stop learning. I'm always trying to develop new ways of doing stuff, new ways of training people. And that's been our secret to success. And that's even why when I do all the Instagram and Facebook photos and videos, it's always very short snippets. Very short snippets. I can't give everybody. It's not a secret. It's just that the way I put it together is my own formula for success.
Yeah.
Right. And if somebody copies that, then I have to make a new formula.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of how I do it. But a lot of data driven, and a lot of understanding the human body, understanding even in teaching styles when to switch to something new based upon the science of in today's world what the attention span of the average adult or average kid is. I have all that stuff, all that data. So I know at this point in class I need to switch because your learning already went like this. I have about 5 minutes left to teach you or review.
Yeah.
And then you're through learning for the day because the average adult has this much time of attention span where they're in the learning zone. And then you just drop off and you're like, right?
So
like you're looking at me, but you're not learning.
You're not processing.
No, you're
right?
not processing.
Do you apply that in terms of like, how do you apply that? Do you cut classes shorter, or do you just, hey, we're going to apply for the rest of the day for muscle memory?
It's the art of teaching. So I can't
Which is an art and
it is,
skill,
it is.
right? Yeah.
It's the art of teaching and it's understanding the crowd that you have that day.
Got it.
So it's not it's a data thing, but it's also a
like reading the room.
Yeah, a vibe thing. It's all that together. So there's certain I have lesson plans that I make that I have to change if everybody just came in and everybody's high off of life because it's a 4-day weekend. They have a different mind frame than somebody that came in from working all day. So I can teach differently, and the vibe is different, and your attention span is different. Even some of the drills that you have in class, where you do all these shrimps and do all these lunges and stuff, some of those got to change too, because you got to understand where people are coming at from the day. They're coming from these different emails. They're coming from stress from work, from the dog, from the wife, right? You have to change the drills so that it not only activates their body, but it activates their mind. So a lot of teachers don't understand that. How to take that, because if you teach just what I want to teach because it's the way I always taught it and I want you to learn it just like this, your time in their learning zone will be even shorter because you're teaching it the wrong way. You're putting the formula for your class together wrong. And so that's some of the stuff that I teach to other coaches when they take my courses, but it's like you're doing it wrong. So you got to change that around based upon the vibe for the day.
You got to meet them where they're at.
Yeah.
Right? I used to say the same thing to business owners when I would do a lot of marketing. Is I would always tell them, like, okay, it is way easier to convince a mom of 3 kids who just picked their children up from school to buy a burger on their way home.
Yeah.
Because the kids are not going to want to eat your food anyways. You're already tired. Your husband, if he comes home on time, then now you got to cook and you got to do, and it's like, hey, just grab food on your way home. We got you. Meeting them where they're at, right? And it would really drive it home for someone that didn't have that mindset because they're just trying to cook the best burger or whatever that is. Selling a car, same thing. It doesn't really matter. It's just really meeting them where they are. One thing, just because we're going to wrap this thing up here, but one thing I wanted to throw out there is, I mean, when we originally connected, I think half of the time that we spoke was talking about marketing. Right. And then even like afterward, when we would grab coffee, it was like deep learning and technology and the application. I
remember all that.
I was going to say, which is very rare in the martial arts world, that someone would be so encompassing in that way and not just, I'm a coach, I'm a teacher, my students will come, and I think there's time, place, and season for everything. But for you, like, is that natural? Were you just always a natural
I'm a
curious
strategic
person?
thinker.
Okay.
So that's kind of like my superpower is strategy. Like, I'm not the best fighter in the world, but as far as a general on the battlefield, I would say I'm way higher than my level of fighting, actual fighting ability. Like, if I see you doing something, it breaks down in my mind almost like some kind of movie where it extrapolates and you should do this. And so that's my style. Like, I can see everything. It's like it's
like chess. They can see.
Yeah, I can see it. Like, I don't even know how to explain it other than like a movie. Like maybe like Robert Downey Jr. and was that Sherlock Holmes, where it's like I'm gonna punch to the ribs, and then like
classic. Yeah.
it's like and then I'm gonna elbow you in the face.
Yeah.
You know, so
Yeah.
I see it like that,
Mm.
and that's how I help develop people, so I can see where their weaknesses are, their strengths are, how to fix it, and how to not keep repeating the same mistakes. And because I have the data and I analyze it so much, it helps people cut out. It helps. It's not a shortcut. It helps people cut out the fat faster,
Got it.
right? So I tell people, it doesn't matter who you are, what level. If you stay here long enough and that's your goal, like I'll make you a champion, like no problem.
Mm.
You just have to have the discipline to do it. But as far as the other part, we got the strategy. I got the winning formula. I will get you there if you have the mindset for it. You know.
I mean, there's quite a lot of banners here, banners on that wall,
Yeah, I
banners on
still
the
got
other
more
side.
coming.
We got more on the
ordered.
way. They're
Yeah.
just in production, right?
Yeah. So.
But no, I mean, the proof is in the pudding in a lot of ways. But thank you for your time. I do.
Yeah.
Next time I sit down with you, I want to go deeper into the data side of it,
Okay.
and balancing the data with the flow.
Oh yeah.
Right, and the vibe and the feeling of the room and whatnot. But thank you for your time.
Absolutely. Man. Thank you, Quinton.